Welcome. You're listening to John Hyman from Commercial Real Estate Online. This is another training video for commercial real estate agents and brokers around the world, with a particular focus on staying ahead in commercial property management. And indeed, if you have something to do with the industry now, you'll know that commercial property management is quite a busy part of the industry, as well as shopping centre management and retail shopping centre management as well. So, this video is all about some of the aspects that come into play when you are considering staying ahead of the issues within managing commercial or retail or perhaps industrial property. And if you haven't visited us before, please do so at the website, which is commercial-realestate-training.com. So let's go back to this topic and cover a few subsections here for you so that you understand the bigger issues that are necessary to be monitored as far as staying ahead of the game. So what are the bigger things that you should monitor and keep under control? So let's have a look. The bigger things. Well, here they are. Some of the main things anyway. The leases within the property, the tenants in occupancy, the landlord or landlords, the vacancies that need to be managed, the property maintenance routines that occur, also the rental payments, the critical dates that need to be monitored from the leases, reporting requirements to the landlord, compliances as to building codes and other codes, and also income and expenditure. So they are the big things. I'll look at some of those here now for you, and let's look at leases to start with. Within leases, of course, there will be certain terms and conditions to be checked and monitored, and from that there will be a rental type. Now that could be a gross rent or it could be a net rent, but from the terms and conditions you'll understand whether it is a gross rent or a net rent, and the difference between the two will be the outgoings that are being recovered from that tenant and from other tenants in the property. These other two words here, face and effective, they apply when there's an incentive which is at play, when a tenant is encouraged to enter into a lease and is given an incentive as part of that process. So a lease deal with an incentive is a face rent. An effective rent is a rental where there are no incentives given to the tenant. Now let's have a look at the other tenant issues. With tenants, it pays to monitor the specialty tenants, that's the smaller tenants, and in retail that's exactly what they are. They're the smaller tenants that form around the anchor tenant in the property. And if you have a big retail property, well, you'll have probably one or two anchor tenants, and you'll need to see how the specialty tenants fit around the anchor tenants, the relevance to the customer mix. Now within all of that, of course, you need to understand exactly the expansion and contraction requirements of the specialty tenants. Some will need to get smaller, some will need to get larger, and that balance will give you a plan of renovation, relocation, and new leasing over time with your better tenants. You don't want to lose your good tenants. If they need to expand or contract, consider the timing of doing that and how it can fit into the overall property tenancy mix plan. And indeed, you do need a tenant mix plan these days. Let's go to landlords. Now, every landlord will have certain issues to monitor and check. I put here some of the main ones. The cash flow. Some landlords have a very strong bias towards financing, and you'll need to understand exactly how much money is required to keep the cash flow for the landlord under control when it comes to their mortgage payments and the building maintenance matters. Of course, the landlord may have the property as an investment, and there'll be matters to focus on there as well. And the landlord may have a portfolio. That's a few properties around which they build their income per month. And if you have one landlord, it's quite possible that they have 3 or 4 properties that you do manage. And of course, you can then report to that process in the different properties and their income and expenditure activity. So let's look at vacancies. Current vacancies will always exist, probably, in most properties. There's a vacancy factor that needs to be minimized. So you need to work through that. Look at the upcoming vacancies that will come through, and also any lease renewals that do apply to sitting tenants. And look at the market conditions that apply to vacancies. Perhaps there's a vacancy factor in the market for that property type of perhaps 5% of the overall area that's available for the property type. So look at your current vacancy exposure, minimize it as best possible, understand the market conditions, look at the renewals coming up for your existing tenants, and also watch that upcoming tenant profile so that you catch any renewals as they go through. From that, you need to understand property maintenance activities. Most properties will have a budget of some sort, and that's exactly what you need to monitor. Within that budget, there'll be some capital expenditure activity. Now, capital expenditure relates to the larger items which are of a non-repair and maintenance nature. Capital expenditure is largely for those very big issues that need to be replaced within the property. Of course, within property maintenance, you'll have contractors to administer, watch and manage, and then you'll also have planned maintenance and unplanned maintenance. Now, unplanned maintenance is typically something that breaks down and needs repair quite quickly. Planned maintenance, on the other hand, is something that you understand and can move into a routine of maintenance over time. In other words, spread the expense. Here's some other things to watch. Rental payments. Now, every tenant will have perhaps some rent reviews to watch. There are different types of rent reviews, of course, which will be market reviews, percentage reviews, fixed dollar amount, and other types, perhaps geared to some consumer price index escalation. And then there are market rentals. Now, the market rentals, of course, are geared to different properties and the same location, and the rents will be compared from property to property. So watch out for the market rent reviews and be prepared to get your comparables in each case. Of course, each lease has certain lease terms to be watched and administered, so keep an eye on that. And each lease will have certain default provisions. Now, a default provision is where a lease and a tenant defaults, and when that occurs, the lease kicks in and will manage the defaulting process. The tenant will need to comply with the terms and conditions of the lease. So, as far as rent payments go, watch the rent payments, have a look at the default provisions in the lease, understand those lease terms, market rents and all the rent reviews fitting around the tenancy mix. The larger the tenancy mix, the more difficult that can be. And critical dates are something to be watched. Critical dates are those important dates within the lease, the things that kick into play. If you have a lot of tenants, you'll have a lot of critical dates to watch, so that's really important. And you can put those dates into some software program to bring up the diary notes as appropriate as you go through the year. Now, critical dates could be for certain landlord issues, options, renewals, renovations within the property, some sales figures, or other tenant covenants. Covenants means lease terms and conditions. So in addition to that, we have to look at reporting. Now, reporting is generally to the landlord. So what do they need when it comes to reporting by way of budgets? What do they need at the end of the month, the end of the quarter, and at the end of the year? So understand your landlords and the reportings that they do require. Compliances are a different thing again. That is the building codes as they apply to the current building and its improvements today. Of course, there'll be energy compliances to look for, heritage perhaps, occupational health and safety, and permitted use. So the building needs to comply with the regulations that are relevant to that property itself. So we go from here and we go to income and expenditure. You will have outgoings to manage, and of course you'll have gross and net rent. I mentioned those two things earlier. Now the difference between the two is the outgoings, and here are the outgoings here. Some will be controllable, others will be uncontrollable. And you'll have recoverable outgoings from the tenants, and you should also understand the industry standards that apply to income and expenditure. That is the outgoings. So that's the end of this particular topic. I've covered those bigger issues for you. Leases, tenants, landlords, vacancy, property maintenance, rental payments, critical dates, reports, compliance, and income and expenditure. So that's the first part of staying ahead in commercial property management. There'll be other parts to this particular series, and you can get them at our YouTube channel, or you can also get them as being part of our online community at commercial-realestate-training.com. And here is the website again. Again, if you haven't visited us, perhaps you may like to do so, because the website is quite comprehensive and there are many different topics covered each day. And here is the website here for you. Today we loaded a podcast which related to certain aspects of the industry, sales, leasing and property management. And there's the podcast there. Of course, many other topics for you to pick up on and give you that advantage in the marketplace. So that's the end of this video. My name is John Hyman. You can visit us online. Thanks for listening to this particular video, which is all about staying ahead in commercial property management. This is John Hyman signing off for now. I'll catch you again very soon.